And we're live. Welcome to chatWater, the show where we chat everything Blackwater. Boy, oh boy. Welcome. M. Yanis. Let's talk about what happened on Saturday. Big day.
Oh my. Big day. I
Finnan
felt
got
like
an
it was
extra head.
Yep, Finnan got an extra head.
We have to start there.
Let's
Yeah,
start
we got to start with the extra head. Finnan's got an extra head. So,
Brisha?
Brisha.
I don't know how I feel about it.
Well, the thing that there was a funny disconnect where like Tim was so excited about the item that he sent it to us afterwards, and so there was a real moment of us being like, we all know exactly what this head does, but the characters don't. And Adam was like, so like, I want to eat this head. When can I learn enough to justify me eating the head?
The
and Tim
heart,
was like,
you mean?
Oh, sorry, the heart. Excuse me. Tim was like, pump the brakes. Like, everyone's watching. It's steaming in your hand, and then like. Because I knew that the DC to grow the head was like 10.
10.
It's like really easy to pass. And so when Tim was like, yeah, Sean, go look at this. I'm like, oh, I'm thrilled. I am honored.
I was like, there was part of me that was like, I don't know if this is like a rite of passage where like he has to grow a head now. Like I was like, part of me was like, narratively, does he have to grow a head now? I was like, but I don't know. I wonder what will happen with it. With when because Brisha hasn't even I hate this broken the surface yet. Like we don't like it hasn't come through yet. It's just
there's
a
so
little
many
lump
questions.
in his trap.
Is it going to be played by Tim, or like who's it going to be played by? Is it going to be Adam? Is it going to be Tim? Will Tim just be like roll the dice and decide like this session it's going to be played by Lennon and like. And that's just a quirk of our show.
Oh my gosh.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Because I vote Adam should not be in control of Brisha. I think someone else should be Brisha.
Brisha should probably I feel like Tim should be in control of Brisha. Because I mean they will have some shared consciousness, or it, depending on, because we don't know what the consciousness of Moros Fike was like. Like the thing that I think though is that like they were all talking, the voices of Moros Fike were all talking in unison. So there must be some sort of shared. And I mean, also Moros Fike was like forever old. So we don't know, like maybe the older you get, the more your heads start to work in unison and you can like meld them together. But maybe when they originally start off, they're like two completely separate consciousnesses. So it would make sense for like Tim to play Brisha at that point.
Let's have
Here's my
moved.
No.
Please?
No. Here's my question.
I don't like it. Don't like it at all. I'm not on
Remind
board.
me what Finnan's patron's name is. I can only think of Rysel. Relauven, right. My question is Brisha going to get along with Relauven?
That's my
question. I was wondering if Brisha was going to be Relauven.
My question is, though, because Finnan didn't check in with Relauven before eating the heart, like, is Relauven even okay with that? Like, considering that this heart was the seat of like a piece of such unfathomable anger that sat within Moros Fike, that was like, corrupted by this implantation of this spearhead in its essence, of course.
Also, it turns his heart somewhat into Saracite,
yes.
Which opens the door to just possession. Relauven could probably just inhabit that and just take over Finnan's body. Like, we're probably not there yet, because like
I think there will be someone in Sava Illyria who will be able to tell us more. Part of me thinks that Finnan should have waited to eat the heart, but that's just my like overly cautious, let's not play the mandolin out in the middle of nowhere nature. We'll talk about the mandolin shortly because I have questions. But I think we probably should have talked to somebody about it first. But I can imagine that there was such an urgency for Finnan to eat it. I think Adam to eat it.
it was Adam. Let's be real. Adam wanted to do it. Finnan didn't know anything about it except that it was a heart, and then he kept on asking omniscient God if there was anything edible about it. Do I know that I can eat this? I'm gonna be alone with the heart for a second. Like, unless there's something we don't know about Finnan's relationship to the hearts of his enemies, which I would fucking love if Adam just pivoted and be like, yeah, this whole time secretly I've just been really into eating the hearts of my enemies, and I didn't think it was okay, but now that I've done this, I feel like I can really be the honest me with you. That was just big old player bleed being like, I want this to happen, so buckle up.
Yeah, here we go. Let's buckle our boots about it. Yeah, I really liked Neppy's conversation with him about like trying to ground him a little bit and be like, there is implications with what you've done now. Like, you who lives quite fast and loose and a little bit like lives your life a little bit recklessly, like barring, you dying without the ability to be revived, you're going to outlive all of us. Like, and I don't even know, like, if the heads both go down at the same time, I don't know if one can revive the other. Was that your question,
If he
Sean?
gets shot in the face, does Brisha take over? Because if so, there might be a reality where we don't bring back Finnan and Brisha's our new friend.
No.
I like the idea.
God, I'm so happy that you're not the cleric.
I like the idea that Brisha could multi-class into a different class.
I'm excited to meet Brisha, whoever they are.
I love single dad Finnan. I really hope that's 16-year-old single dad Finnan with his baby on his neck. I love this direction.
Terrifying.
He can have play dates. Brisha can have a play date with Jar.
Oh,
and they can learn magic together.
God damn it.
And like Finnan will chaperone because he has to, because they're attached at the neck.
Because they're attached at the neck. Tim is just snickering in the background whole time.
Can you imagine if it's like a regular aging as well? So for like the next 9 years, he has a toddler.
He's gonna live to be 500, Yanis. He's got time.
I know, but the head could come out like a fully formed adult, or he could have to raise it from baby.
It should be a baby head. It should 100% be a baby head.
It should be removed.
No.
I don't think we can do that. I don't know if you heard Tim laughing in the background about this being removed.
I love Tim, and I very rarely question his world building, but this is one of those times where I was like, you gave it to Adam. Like Tim knew that he was gonna eat it. Like, there was no reality where Adam was not gonna eat that.
Tim loves a Chekhov's gun. Tim loves a Chekhov's gun. Just like, pull it, do it.
Yanis, I don't understand.
We're gonna get like some sort of tag on Twitch for the description of him eating that heart. Like, we're gonna enter.
I'm gonna put a content warning in it on YouTube. I'm gonna put a content warning about it. Also, spoilers if you haven't seen it. There is a bit where there's some just like it's a lot.
If you haven't seen it, you shouldn't be watching this. Firstly, so many spoilers.
No, please come and hang out with us. We're going to get to some other stuff later. Hang out.
Secondly,
just forget this stuff. It's fine.
Well,
yeah, here's the thing. I don't understand what you're upset about. There was a reality in which Finnan didn't grow another head, and now there's a reality in which Finnan has grown an extra head.
Yes.
And I just don't see how this is the worst timeline. This is an absolute gift for all of us.
Moving on from the head.
All right, beg to differ, agree to disagree. That's fine. We're grown-ups.
If he had tuned to the heart, he would have gotten all of the benefits minus the head, correct?
Nah, it wouldn't be quite as powerful.
Yeah, he wouldn't get the raging. He wouldn't have gotten the excessive.
It doesn't matter if he rages, because he can't fucking cast a spell if he's raging. So it's pointless for a warlock to be able to rage.
No. I mean, well, this is actionable and at the table, but
yes.
We'll see.
Can you rage and cast a spell?
I'm just saying, maybe he doesn't exclusively have to cast spells as of level 15.
Okay, that's true. He could multiply.
I know Adam was thinking about changing up invocations and stuff like that to make him more capable as a potential. I mean, this is stuff for him to play out in other areas.
Well, here's my question. Just before we move on, there is a reality in which Finnan didn't eat it, and one of the other party members ate it, and they have an extra head. I would like to just take a little bit of space to play and imagine what a kokanee with a little nokani stick. It would basically be like
Tokenie,
the Lightkeeper's baby that they could raise together, and it would like
Neppy would.
Neppy would divorce him.
No, she wouldn't. She
would Neppy love her husband if he had a little baby head sticking out of his neck?
She would have like really counseled him on the choice that he was making and why are you doing this particularly? Why do you feel like you need
It's
to do
already
this?
Happened. We're not interested in how we got there.
She wouldn't
He
leave
went
him
out on a
because of
boys'
it.
nights with Finnan and letters
he
and
ate a
came
heart.
back with an extra head. He lost a
Okay.
bet.
She certainly wouldn't leave him. She would be like, okay, this is a choice you made. This Arathis is about choice. This is a choice you made. I am going to honor this choice that you made, and we carry forward, I suppose, and we figure it out.
The only person I would be comfortable having actually eaten it and grown an extra head is Clack. That is the only person I would have been comfortable with doing
second that. I absolutely second that.
Clack being able to rage and still use the Wand of Wonder and having an extra little baby Clack coming out of his neck would have been so good.
A chef's kiss.
Chef's kiss. But I guess we have to deal with
Brisha.
Whatever their name is,
Brisha. I really like the meaning though. Gaelic for extra.
It is definitely extra.
I'll stop. We can move on.
We found some ships.
We did.
That was a fun little fight.
Yeah,
where it's like,
those things
I
were
put you to
very
sleep
hard.
and eat you.
Sleepy.
My thing was like, what happens when we're all asleep? Yeah. That was my question. Like, what happens when we're all asleep? Damage. Yeah.
Then they crawl over to us and eat our brains.
You would have woken up every time they attacked you when you were asleep.
Pain.
Now they probably have a special attack where when you're right up next to them, they can just like get inside your head, because we do know they can move because we slept and then they were there and then they weren't there.
Gone. And we saw their hands moving and one rolled over. So yeah, man, there have been some times in the last like 3 episodes where Neppy has just like gone down multiple times. And I'm just like, okay, here we go. I'm like buckling myself up to die. And like,
that's because Neppy and Callie, every episode, keep throwing themselves in front of bullets that aren't even being shot at them. You're like diving for bullets that are gonna miss. You're like, I gotta get this. I gotta take the damage.
No. I don't do that. I cancel natural 20s. I mean, Callie now has her ability where she can take the damage, and like Neppy was just like, okay,
you would have stayed up if you canceled the natural 20 against yourself.
Yeah, but we don't. Yeah, okay, fine. But like, we also, I have no idea if we're gonna face Rysel. I didn't know if we were gonna face Rysel that day. Like, I have to be careful. How many times
can you cancel the natural 20s then?
Only 5.
And there was a moment where
I was at 4. I've already canceled 4.
Knocked out and you fell on top of somebody,
Callie.
Which begged the question, why were you standing over somebody? Just because you wanted to take a bullet for them?
I literally had just stood up and I was standing next to Callie, trying to wake her up.
15 feet of movement.
I was trying to wake her up.
You either wake them up or you don't. I'm like, all I'm saying is some of us said, oh, we're all bunched up, we should probably move, and then we were fine.
Yeah, but that's not who Neppy is.
Neppy doesn't. You admitted it.
Of course. I've never been afraid. I've never been like, never hidden from that.
Look. All I'm saying is that's why you're going down so much. You gotta look. Just don't say that you're not diving to take bullets. Like, don't tell me that when that's literally who Neppy is. I love it, but don't pee on my shoe and tell me it's raining. Like.
I mean, I guess that the phrase diving to take bullets, that was the one that threw me off. I was like, I would say Neppy doesn't leave other people when they're down. That is.
Neppy will lay on top of them while a truck drives over the both of them so they can die together, because that'd be what's right.
Shut up, Tim Carlson. Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, that's probably right. Neppy would absolutely. Yeah. Neppy would, and just gets so frustrated when other people do it. Like that's more Emma than anything else. Like, I am the last person to give myself any form of break or self-care, but then I'm no, take breaks. Like, please take care of yourself, and I just don't do that. So
yeah, I'm really enjoying, especially now that Callie has the new like build, which is all about let me take the bullet for you.
Yeah.
The competitive nature of like, we're all going to take the bullets, because that really came up that one giant fight where we had Limerick and everyone was trying to take the bullet, and after that I've been like, oh, I don't have to do this. I can just like
who are gonna
back
take the
up
bullet.
and I just don't want it as much as you two.
But see,
That-
the
that was
thing
one
is,
of my
like,
favorite parts
go ahead.
about that Limerick fight was like, you're like, I'm gonna go up to the monster and get in front of the rest of the party, and then Callie was like, I'm gonna go up in front of the monster and get between letters
No,
and the monster. And
I didn't do that. I didn't get
no,
between the party. That was
no,
Callie.
that's what I
was all
did.
Callie. Oh,
This
letters
was
to
a
Ben.
previous fight, and then Limerick was like, I'm gonna go and stamp, and then Callie and you were like, we're already here, and I imagine this like moment where it's like letters, and then Callie squeezes in like the tiny gap, and then Limerick's like trying to get in, but there's like physically no
Slips through the
space.
legs because he's a rogue and he takes the
Pops
shot.
up.
I'm prone, hit me.
Yeah, no,
Start
Blackwater.
stabbing yourself and be like, I'm more injured.
Good.
Death.
There's just a core within Blackwater that is just like, please hit me first. But like, but that's all my whole thing with Tim is just snickering so hard in the back.
It's such a delight to have him in the room. Like I
know.
can't see him, but I just know that he's like really
he's
active
there.
tonight.
You
We
know
love it.
he's yeah. So I think that there's like, if Neppy is correctly positioned, it's like I shouldn't be frontline, like at all. My AC is high to keep myself alive so I can keep other people alive. I think the problem that I've been encountering is so that like whole thing of like, let me cancel this damage, let me do this, let me do this, let me like do chant and stuff that buffs all of you. It works really, really great when I'm not up front. But the problem, one of the problems I've been encountering, I've just been caught there. And then because of exactly who Neppy is, if someone is down, like I won't leave them because that's just who Neppy is. Because like you don't leave someone there because she can't. She just can't do it.
That's part of the reason that I'm so excited with the new Tash's classes to play like a dual classing cleric armor artificer.
Oh fuck, it'd be so good.
Because you could just you just be like
your tank.
Like yeah, you'd be a tank and you'd be right in the middle there, and you would just have like crazy AC because you can like pump up all your individual armor pieces, but you can also do like the bless and the canceling of D20 of critical hits and stuff. Like it would.
You can only do that if, like you'd have to be a grave cleric artificer because that's only a grave cleric thing.
Dual classing with a artificer armor, but it would be such a fun class to be like the guy up there who's just like almost impenetrable and is just like getting bashed around.
I never throw a punch.
But I mean, like Callie with Shield of Faith, her AC is 24, which is fucking insane. Like she is so powerful. And I know we like Lennon's often talked like when she's come on chatwater about like, you know, playing Callie like a barbarian because she's a bucket full of hit points. She's also hit smash with swords so hard, but now like her magic, like, and it's really, really cool for me to see Lennon kind of really come into her own with that as well and feel so much more comfortable, like especially around the stuff with the Oath of the Crown, because it's something that's really hers, and feels like what's narrative and mechanics kissing. So like it when something feels more yours, you can obviously do it more. And like I think the thing about Callie is that like she never wanted to be angry, she just was. So it made it perhaps like subconsciously less appealing to use all the like channel divinities like the Vow of Enmity and like all of those other ones that she never really used. But now it's really cool to watch her use her magic and use all of these like, and the turn the tide ability that she has. Like it's so cool. And I think it's such an interesting aspect to the way that Lennon plays and that also now Callie exists in the world. It's really, really cool.
What's the name of the owl? I love that we have an owl.
Fezzik.
Fezzik. I just want to say that Fezzik exists and that's great. Let's talk about this harp, mandolin, flute. I forget what it is.
It's a mandolin.
It's mandolin.
So I like the
kind that you do like potatoes on.
The second I saw it,
I don't know enough about cuisine art to get this joke.
There's a cooking implement called a mandolin.
Yes.
Anyways.
Dude,
so yeah.
My guts are busted.
Just like the wrong crowd. I hope Tim giggled. At this point, I'm just doing it for Tim.
I know. Cody, for everyone who's wondering, Cody has wonderfully taken the night off, as he should, and Tim is our scroll this evening. So, you know, thank you to the sweet Tim Carlson for doing that. But also, we get the Snickers in the background because he's usually in the other room while we're filming. But so the second that mandolin, I was like, this shouldn't be here. The second they were like, yeah, there's something strange. I was like, this shouldn't be here. This is in Delirium. No, 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 no. I was like, something is so off about
So
it.
M, give us your M. Carlson lorekeeper hot take, not your Neppy hot take. 'Cause I know M knows stuff that Neppy doesn't know.
I don't know if I can drop it here though.
Actionable at the table. That's right. Keep
Some
it.
of it, but okay, there is some of it that I can drop.
Okay.
So that Neppy that I know that is like within reach. So when Tim was like, it's not of this universe, I was like, ping, because Neppy's accessed the multiverse before, right? Like all of my Adonis one shots that we do for my birthdays, like Adonis is like in tune with the multiverse. So if this thing is here from another universe, I mean, Adonis has to have something to do with it. Like I don't think the jump is that big to be like, somebody's been fucking with some multiverse shit and this thing is here. This creature, whoever this creature was that doesn't speak any language, that like this musical language. And also I know stuff about like, I know the deep lore. I was there when it was written. It's my Aslan moment. Like I know there's some deep lore that Tim and I are working on about the like creation lore of Terrace itself. So he and I are like writing that together and talking about the ages and periods of time that have gone through the world and what has happened with the multiverse and all that kind of stuff. So the second music came up for me and he talked about the musical voice and the musical instrument. I was like, that's some multiverse shit. So I think Adonis has got something to do with it. And I think that this is Tim dropping a little crumbly for us to follow at some point that won't.
Two like semantic thing. Not of this universe and not of this plane are two different things.
Very different things.
Because this wasn't just like, oh yeah, like Corellon is the one who does all the E-pop, right?
Corellon, yep.
Corellon, yeah. And so I was like, oh, Harp, Corellon, we just did the
that could be
chatWater
Feywild linked, right?
Yeah. But then like if he would have spoke Sylvan, we would have recognized it.
Exactly. Or the stuff with the mind flayers. I was like, okay, is this like the instruments that we found, like in the Barmwich arc, we found all this room with musical instruments in it. And I was like, is this like, because a lot of the mind flayer language, Qualith is often written like musical stanzas, and it seems to flow a little bit more in their language, though telepathic has some musical tone to it. But I was like, this isn't that, because there would be iconography or something of the astral sea that one of us would pick up on. Like Neppy knows enough about the astral sea probably to put those together. So like, it's not that. It's not Fae. So like, this is multiverse shit. And I'm like fucking excited. I love a multiverse.
I'm really excited to do the old, hey, Callie, sit next to me while I try to plumb the depths of this arcane mystery.
Yeah, I was like, let's not do that in the middle of this like frozen wildland. Like, please.
Let me set a fire in the corner. Fucking someone cast resistance on me, and I will try not to go insane.
There. Yes. Yeah. Tim is just not looking at me and just smirking in the background and just doing one of these.
Earned it.
But the funny thing to me is that even though like M can make the connection, like a possible connection to Adonis, you can't.
Neppy knows nothing.
Neppy can't ask him anything because you don't know.
Yeah, because he's a coward and he wiped all our memories. The butt. Because he doesn't want us to know that he fucked up as an angel when he should be more powerful than that. He needs a group of ragtag adventurers to come and save his ass every now and again.
We love him. One more thing, I want to get to the show itself, and I feel like it's about that time. But just loved it when Nepthysket was like, "Hey, you got to go that way," and it's like, "That's a wall." And Finnan just went, "I can solve this immediately," because we were all about to go into like problem solving mode, and he's like, I cast True Vision, this is my whole thing, and we're just like, oh sick, level 15 is rad.
Level 15 is just lit.
The fact that just the implications that he can stare into the ethereal plane is
huge,
big. I don't know anything about the ethereal plane, but
True
like,
Seeing is a very, very powerful spell and has like huge implications for very scary things that we may come across. So it's a very awesome spell that he has access to. And I think with warlocks, you get, rather than like access to the spell slots, you get Mystic Arcanum. So I don't know if that's one of the spells he can cast like multiple times a day. I think it's just once with your Mystic Arcanum, but like how very cool is it that there's just this access to it.
and also it reveals shapeshifters. And who's a bad guy who changes shape? Fucking Rysel, Erkin, and what's her nuts? Cordelia or Cora.
Cora Thorngage.
Like, all our baddies love to be other people.
They do.
And if we're ever suspicious, we can just be like, poke Finnan, and he can go like,
get your eyes up, pal. Yeah. No, I think like I also there's one more thing I want to talk about. Sean Deppner making me misty about the Callie stuff with like wanting to not have it so that she would have her brain all scrambled. Like, that's so sweet.
This is why I've been like, hey, Tim, do we level up? Because I've got big narrative and mechanics kissing, and I can't get it till level 8.
My
Like,
question is, are you going to spend it every single day? You're going to spend your 8th level spell slot to do that?
Yanis, I didn't take another 8th level spell.
No, I'm just.
It's the only 8th level spell I know.
But I don't. I'm usually the type who, if I like when I have one like top level, I only take one, because otherwise, what I end up doing is you can only have so many spells. And what I used to do when I first started is I'd like, oh, I have 5th level spells. I take all my spells as like 5th level, because it'd be like, oh, this one's cool, this one's cool, and then it'd be like, cast something at first, and I'd be like, ooh, I have 2 options to cast at first, and lots of spell slots, and no spell slots at 5th, and lots of spells. So. But yeah, that's quite a choice.
I love it. I love it so much.
And I'll tell you something, the other spell I took, there's a very realistic chance that you'll never see the result of it. It was a real like letters on his own time kind of spell, and I am thrilled. It's a real long con of a spell, and we'll see how it relates, and that's actionable and at the table. Ain't I, baby?
I love that. And I think I know for the spell that I took because the way that I pick Neppy spells is like, I look at, because I, as a cleric, I have the ability to.
You get access to all of them.
I get access to all of them, but I have rules for how Neppy would access spells. Like if there's
what are those? That's a chatwater topic if ever there was one.
So like there's certain types of cleric spells that she's just like, oh, I won't use that because it's not. It's like very broadly.
Not on brand.
It's not on brand. So like,
what type of spells?
Oh gosh, you know what? Here I actually have.
This is what chatwater is for.
So I purchased I love these. These are the official D&D wizard spell cards. So like spells, like I'm trying to find spells that are just all cleric spells. Like animate dead would never do that, right? That's just like. Just would never do. I'm trying to think some other, because
it took you a long time to get to talk with dead, but like to actually create undeath.
For me, it's about the narrative of like, when would Neppy have you wanted to use the spell, and would there be other things that would have been more effective that she would have gone to first? Tim, can you pass me my spell book that's over there next to my my books?
When I pick Kale spells, I pick almost exclusively fire-related spells.
Thank you.
Fire and heat are his sort of like his jam.
Like insect plague. Why would Neppy ever cast?
You're right. That's a spooky spell.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Not a Neppy spell.
Or Geas, like the forcing someone to carry out service of some kind. Gosh, that is so against what Neppy would stand for and want. Like, service should be a choice, and service should be something that like brings you honor and joy. So like forcing someone to carry out a job for her, no thank you. Flame strike, there is one instance in which I would potentially prep that spell, but that's actionable and at the table. And like some of the spells I just like would never really keep on hand. Like I keep I've taken Stone Shape when we were down in Searing Dune, but that was for the specific purpose of like we're going around a wall. Neppy's
Mhm.
very practical about what kind of spells, and all of the spells that I, prep on a regular basis are all very on brand for her.
So remind me just quickly again, for my knowledge, clerics can repick their spells every long rest.
Yes.
Okay, and wizards.
Yeah.
I have access to every spell, every cleric spell, but I can only prep a certain number.
And
every
wizards
day.
only have access to spells that they have found.
Yeah, so wizards, if you find like a spell scroll, you can put it into your thing at a cost. But every level, you get access to 2 more spells. But every day, you pick of the spells you know which ones you want to have prepped that day. But importantly, the wizard spell list is like 3 times as long as the cleric spell list. So like every level you get like 2 spells, and it like I took 1 8th level spell
what
and
you
1
mean.
other level spell, but oftentimes like when I got to 7th level I took 1 7th level and like 1 3rd level spell because I wanted to fill out the utility.
Like clerics also get True Seeing.
Oh,
Like I can have access to True Seeing, but like why would Neppy need to see that? Why would she need to be the one to detect secret doors?
no, that's
or
Finn's
see into the
brand. Don't
ethereal
come for
brain?
that.
I was like, I don't need that. I'm also very much about like there are other people in my party who can do that thing. Let me specialize in my thing. You do your thing. And we'll
Letters
work
doesn't do
together.
necromancy. Letters
That's
doesn't do
great.
necromancy.
Yeah.
He doesn't have anything against it. He's just like, it didn't really come up, and I'm with Spooky. I don't want to come for a brand.
Yeah,
Like
for her brand.
he's got a
And-
reason he doesn't do enchantment. He doesn't really have a reason not to do necromancy, except it's kind of yucky and it's not his brand.
Yeah, and I really respect that. Like, I think about the spells that I keep access to. Like there are some, obviously the spells that I have access to as a grave cleric all the time, but like the spells that I keep for Neppy, I find are ones that she would find useful, because I have kind of 2 kits of spells. I have like my in town, not battling, not out, not high priestess Nepentha out to save the world spells. I have like my just Neppy spells, and then I would have like my priestess kit.
Grandiose.
Yeah,
like my
I
kit.
got my kit. I
I've
love
got
my
priestess kit.
let's fuck with people socially kit. It's
Oh,
all
yeah.
like knock and like blink, and
Yeah.
it's like, ooh, I'm not really here to kill people,
And
but I'm
fucking
gonna.
half my spells these days are just to keep Kokanee alive from poison damage. So like, it's fine. No,
So
I've
you
actually,
married.
I know. I took
Quickly,
from
we should get
Tasha's.
him. We need to get him that belt so that we can put it in Tiana's artwork. Because at
So
some
he
point we're
has
gonna
to
have
wear
to
it?
force. We're gonna have to force him at some point to take. The
No,
belt.
he'll never do it. He'll never do it.
I forgot I have resistance to poison now. It just hasn't come up, but I forgot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, now you have to protect Finnan as well because he's
Good. I
acid
can't.
is
I
gonna
don't.
kill
There's
him.
There's nothing that protects from acids. There's like no one. There's protection from energy.
Like goggles and like gloves, I understand is pretty important.
And a good bath with the right chemicals in it. No, like the one spell I took from Tasha's, because there's not a lot of cleric spells in Tasha's. I think there's 2 that clerics now get access to. There was Spirit Shroud, which when I read it was way more Kokanee's brand than Neppy's brand. So I was like, I'm not gonna even go for that because that's just not me. Or now some of the Paladin spells can now be taken as cleric spells. So I took Aura of Purity, which is every non-hostile creature in the area, including you, can't become diseased, has resistance to poison damage, and has advantage on saving throws that cause any of the following conditions: blind, charmed, deafened, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, or stunned. So
that feels neppy.
It's right. It's like it's another form of chant.
It's tough to put on your finger down on, but like you say that, I'm like, yeah, that's neppy. Put it in the book. We love that.
Right. So like I feel like chant is one of those quintessential neppy spells that so chant is from this the not so complete tome of spells that Tim has found. That's a bunch of spells from previous editions. He discovered it online and was like, hey, if you like any spells from this, run them by me. This was earlier on, and we can go from there. So chant was one of them in there. I was like, ooh, this is a good spell. But the whole thing around it was that I had to travel to Philenis and I had to get there. So I didn't really get access to it until I was at Philenis. So when I got Bolt of Glory, I got chant, and also another one called Agitate Wounds, which is also really, it's like inflict wounds, but grosser. And I love it. Yeah.
We love that.
So yeah, so I think that there is options to, like, if you are playing a character and you want to infuse more narrative in it, it can be something as simple as changing your spell book to not necessarily be the spells that are going to just like have some spells in there that hit really fucking hard. like do that if you want to do that, but also have some spells that are narratively fit for you.
Find a brand.
Find your brand and just like live your brand, you know? That's what I got to say about that.
I always like to think of like what moments in a battle would I want my character to have. So like if I was reading it in a book and I was like, because that's very much my thing, like I'm always trying to insert myself as the hero without meaning to, but like I'm always like, what would be that defining moment that my character like steps up? Like Callie has like the smite, you know, and like Limerick had the sneak attack bow shot to the jugular. Like,
gosh,
what is
like 3 times
moment,
with that?
What is the moment I would want him to have like visually in my brain?
Yeah.
And then I build the spells that like support that. So I'm like, oh, okay, this spell kind of fits that energy. And then I like build moments where like that I would be like, and you know, that informs to me like how he plays. And then there's ripple effects. Then once you find like one thing, you can like build off of that one thing.
I think of Nepes using the Bolt of Glory as the giant was carrying Callie away, like unconscious Callie away. Like I had never cast that spell up to that point. I was like, okay, this is something I have that was given to me at Philenis from Velvari. So I was like, amazing, cool. And Nepentha has access to the spell and, you know, has it prepared. And now it's just like, oh my God, this giant is carrying my friend away and is still looking quite up. I'm going to cut this giant in half. And I was like, I'm going to cauterize it at the waist. Like, I just was like, that was the moment I was like, you need to go stop that.
And that was your 7th level, right?
That is a 7th level spell.
Because
yes.
I know you, like, it's funny, all the casters, we all have our 7th level saved for something. Like, fucking Spooky has it for the thing. I have teleport ready. You have it for plane shift. And so when we do use the 7th level, oh, it's business time.
Well, that's like when Finnan came up after the end of the Moros Vike fight. I was like, there is no way I'm not using my 7th level slot to pump him full of like, just to cast heal on him immediately in that moment. Because I was like, I don't know whether these other giants are going to attack us and we need to fucking run. But like, there is no way that we're bringing you back at just 1 hit point. We're getting 70 hit points in you and we are getting the fuck out of here.
I still had teleport. We would have been fine.
I know, but we didn't really know where we were teleporting. Well, we could have teleported back to the mansion. But anyway, we should probably roll the intro and start eventually talking about RPG
this show.
This is a new record. This might be a new record.
We're in this deep. Let's just never roll the intro. Let's just spin our wheels for an hour.
No,
call it
John,
a day.
We're rolling it. Let's do it. And we're back. Okay. I'm jumping into announcements and then we're going to start talking about RPG theory.
Let's do it. Let's get into it.
So Legend Craft's Kickstarter is live and they are fully funded. They are now working on their 2nd stretch goal, which I believe is $9,000. There'll be new veneers, some different customizations that you can get. They're so cool. I love them so much. And look at that sweet Blackwater logo on the back. We have 3 of these for giveaways and we will be announcing how to get your sweet hands on these very soon. If you back the project and then use the code Blackwater when you have to put in your information later in like backer kit or whatever they use, you can get your character's name and class logo, all that art and name customization for free. So that's what you get for being a lovely patron of Blackwater. So all of the designs, as well as, of course, our logo and any of the character designs and stuff like that are all done by the amazing Tiana, our campaign artist, who we love so much. Silverwing Armory, makers of fine paper products for your RPG gaming experience. If you like anything that you see from them, use the code Blackwater at checkout for 10% off. And as always, to Keisha and Tiana, our dice and art patrons respectively. Please check them out on Instagram, give them a follow. Their information is at !artist and !dice in the chat. And Tiana is hard at work on our level 15 character portraits, and there's apparently going to be a group shot, which we didn't know about and only found out about today, and I'm dying seeing some of the early Neppy previews. My girl is such a badass. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So we're really stoked on that. So please go head on over to see them. They do commissions and customized stuff, so message them probably sometime in the new year if you want to get your hands on some of that good stuff. Merchandise. Do you want to get some sweet Blackwater merch on on your bod. Sean, can you show us what you're
Oh
wearing?
yeah. Look what I got. Oh, narrative mechanics. Look, it's the
Kissing.
size of my hands. It's all the thing. Oh my gosh.
Perfect. It's perfect.
Oh.
So head on over to our Teespring store. We have chatWater merch. We have Firebrand Cafe merch. We have Blackwater logo merch. We have Lightkeeper merch, Callie and Kamea merch, a whole bunch of awesome stuff in there. We won't be keeping this stuff around forever. We will be cycling some stuff through. So if you like what you see, head on over to our Teespring and give that a purchase. Please
get
also
that limited edition shit and then just sit on it because it's gonna be so much more valuable when we like fucking blow up, man.
I mean,
like,
maybe, man, maybe.
That's like not a wild thing that could happen. Anyways, keep on going.
That's so true, right? That is so wild to think about. If you get any merch, please send us pictures. We got an awesome photo from one of our lovely fans, Drew B. Drew, who we adore so much and has been with us almost since the beginning. She sent us a picture of her mug that said it's probably spider milk on the back, and it looked like it had a hot chocolate in it. So I was like, this is the best. Send us your pictures to either blackwaterdnd@gmail.com and Instagram, and we will feature them everywhere. We have some lore club updates. We have a community lore project started by our amazing mod, the New Experience Network. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And as one of the heads of Lore Club, I feel very importantly about this project. It's so very cool to see members of our community, like the New Experience Project and FM Mariani Cologne, who are like really jumping in there. CS Graham, I know, has jumped in there too. So thank you all so much if you're watching tonight. This is so cool to watch you build this like beautiful thing. And if you want to become involved and want to start building the Blackwater lore project, you just type !lore in the chat. It'll take you to a Google form and you can submit your name and your email, and the New Experience Network will get in touch with you. I also jump in from time to time to answer questions. So, and I'm sure there will be at some point in the future, maybe lore club meetings. Oh, wow. And
I just had an idea.
Swag also.
I just had an idea, and I know I should save this for when the camera's not rolling, but
okay.
You're going full McGonagall right now, and I love it. And I realized we've been thinking about like what's the next thing that we do at the time we achieve a certain amount of followers, because like January, fucking book your calendars. We're doing the bard thing.
Moly. We're doing that in January. Oh god, I got a whole bunch of stuff.
I just figured because like fucking we're doing the Fenrilic right now.
Yes.
The only reason we haven't done it yet is because I'm DMing this other thing.
Yes,
but
this is true.
I'm saying it right now. Next stretch, fucking MDM's a one shot where we are all acolytes at the new Dresda location, and she like has to make us do things because she's the high priestess Neppy.
Oh my gosh, I DM and just Neppy just gives them dumb tasks about the temple.
Mind your prayers. That's what it's called.
I want that more than almost anything D&D related.
Well, we're going to need a number of followers before we can have it. So now it's in your hands, audience.
Tim's taking notes, and Tim wants to play Grape Nub is what I've heard.
I thought that I might play Grape Nub, and then I thought, no, there's only one person who can play Grape Nub.
It's Tim.
It is Tim.
Yes.
But also we would all have to play females.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
you
they're
cool
all,
with that, Yanis?
No, I
you
am.
Cool
with
that? I play lady.
You got a problem playing a lady.
This could
listen. The only time I've ever played a female D&D character was the first time I ever met Matt, and he flirted with me so hard in character that I blushed and didn't know what to say. So I have not had a great track record playing female characters.
It's gonna be great. It's going to be great. I want this, and this needs to happen. Oh, wow. You just
pick a number.
Me my next...
pick a number. Let's make it official. Yeah, pick a number. How many people do you think?
How many followers do we have now?
We have 859, I think.
1,000. Pick a number. 1,000.
No, we've got something else for 1,000.
Okay.
1,200.
1,200?
1,200.
1,250. 1,250 is a good
1,250.
1,250. You heard it here first, kids. Live. Fucking 1,250. Fucking mind your prayers. The all cleric acolyte one shot DM'd by
all cleric. I didn't even think about that. The all cleric party.
So
wow. I'm just gonna give you a bunch of puzzles that you'll just all be terrible at because there'll be no combat involved.
Can't wait.
I want this so badly. Oh, I'm so excited.
How's that for an announcement? All right, go on to
That's
the other.
another really great announcement. Thank you so much, Sean. Surprise announcements when I'm in the middle of them.
Oh yeah, let's talk about coffee.
Sean, please don't subject me to this
why
again
is it
and
a bad
again.
idea?
Because it's not.
Mish's butt is a feature. Look, here's an announcement. We're thinking of making Mish's butt its own
emote. That is
emote.
true. We are
That
getting
wasn't even my idea.
we are getting a cat butt emote. We are going to be doing that. We're getting a cat butt emote. We're also getting a like Blackwater love emote. So those will be coming from Tiana at some point when.
Why can't we look? Mish is as much of this party as any one of us.
100% agree. But we're not going down this. We're not going down this rabbit hole.
Again. We're not.
But I want to support it. 10%.
Do that quietly.
Oh no.
Quietly.
10%. 10%. I want to see the receipts of what comes through coffee, and I'm gonna do the math of what 10% is.
Fine, Matt does the financials, so you can just ask him about it. I don't.
Look, this is an underground movement. Clearly, it's just you and me, audience member, who thinks this dumb idea is good. But like,
needless
if you
to
commit to
say,
it, I will.
We have a way that people can support us outside of Twitch subscriptions because we're
so
Mish. greatly appreciative of all of the folks who subscribe to us. Also, like if Fernando, if you're out there watching tonight, we saw that you gifted a whole bunch of subs on Saturday in the chat. Thank you so much, just for like your constant patronage and like your love of us and like always being around as part of our community since like almost the very get-go. God, thank you so much. Just makes me all happy inside. So like, if you want to support us outside of a Twitch subscription, which don't necessarily roll over every month, so you may have to re-up those, especially if you're doing that with Prime, we have a coffee. So if you type !donate or !support in the chat, it will take you there. And I'm moving on. We have another audio archive release.
And 90% of everything that goes to the coffee goes to getting us things like better webcams, better access to internet, and 10% goes to something else.
That's all you're allowed to say.
That makes it look like we're going to spend it on drugs.
I just want to... Go ahead, Yanis. Please keep talking. Let's just ignore him.
For those who watch but don't have enough to donate, we just appreciate you guys coming out and watching. I want everyone, like, we've said this before, but maybe we should just say it again. But
please,
we will keep doing this regardless of how many people show up, of how many people
subscribe,
support us. That's not important. That money just goes to like making it look nicer.
Yeah.
So
which we have some big projects in the future coming up for that. So
but
really
if
awesome.
You guys like, this is not going anywhere. So there's no pressure.
And we don't foresee a time where like we're gonna put this behind a paywall. Like, you know, I could see maybe a time in the future that we make the chat like followers only. I don't know. Maybe we have to get big enough to do that.
We would have to get big enough to do that.
Stupidly big to do that. But like this community, the Gravelverse, and you folks out there as the Gravel Boys, like, I know I say this a lot, but like, we are honored that this is the place where you choose to spend your time. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. We've been in a pandemic for like 9 or 10 months with really no signs of it changing for a lot of places in the world. So like the fact that you have the spoons and the energy to come hang out with us means a lot to us. And it's really, really cool to see where this thing has gone in only like 9 months. We've been doing this for, we started March 17th of this year. So it's been, almost 9 months. This is really cool. Okay, I'm going to move on before I start getting misty-eyed. There has been a new audio archive that has been released from the vaults. The Velsum arc is now up on YouTube under the history and lore section. It is the audio archive episodes of when we were just playing our home game. So it's episode 67 to 70. So it's not a lot, but then we basically transitioned right into streaming, which gets you caught up. Also, what I'm going to be working on this week is the Adventures in Amonkhet audio. So that's episode 35 or session 35, which was the big thing that introduce us to Melsav Bakal. So it's really cool. It's a very early audio archive. So it's the very first one I made. So it's super rough. It will need a lot of editing to fix. So it's coming. But I'm really excited, and I'll pop that one in the history and lore section when it is done. Almost done. Tomorrow night. No, I lied. Wednesday night, we have character development with the Sweet Three of Blackwater, Len and Jen and myself coming back to chat all things advice, D&D and beyond. So come hang out with us then. Type !survey if you have any questions. They can be D&D related. They cannot be D&D related. We just talk about anything and everything. It's a bit of a different feel. We answer questions from the chat. And really like engage with everyone, and that's all up all the time. It's a delight. Please come over.
Unlike this show where we don't fucking engage. We do
do
our own thing, and
we
you're
do
not
lore
fucking
time.
invited.
No, you're always invited. Everyone
You're
here is
invited
always
to watch, but we're not.
You're invited to watch, but we don't take
We're not-
fucking
we're
questions.
not taking suggestions.
You want questions? Take that shit to character development.
I take questions from the chat, and I know that there are questions from the Saturday episode that were for this chatwater episode. I haven't had time to lore keep yet. It's been a busy week so far, and it's only
because we
Monday.
chat water. We don't take questions.
Okay,
No
enough.
questions. Mic
And
drop.
Thursday,
Unless it's
Sean.
about cat jewelry.
Then on Thursday, we return to maybe the last episode, but maybe not, of the Frostlands of Fen Relic, DM'd by Sean, featuring myself, Jen, and Matt, and Len. It's our partnership with Onyx Path Publishing. We've been having a really great time. We didn't get a chance to do it last week because of scheduling and life, but we are back this week. My hair is a nice, lovely blue for Wells and Neppy, of course. No, because I've always really wanted blue hair this blue. But if you've missed part 1 and part 2, check them out on YouTube. And they're 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on a Thursday night, because nobody ever watches any other type of D&D on Thursdays. So it's really great. We're excited. And that's it.
Look, going Thursday with a D&D show is really establishing us as the bad boys of the D&D world, where it's like, we're
Right.
anti-establishment. We're not those other guys.
No.
This ain't your granddad's D&D with like
Also,
world class voice actors.
and professional
We're the
studios.
people's D&D, man.
We're
all the love to Critical
Vancouver class voice
You will
actors.
hear
I'm
hear
not a
just
voice
about
actor.
what my opinion on how Critical Role
Van-
has shaped the RPG gaming experience some point in this episode. One last thing too. This is our last week of content before we take a week's break. So we have Chatwater on Monday.
Oh yeah, by the way, Sean, we don't have anything next week.
We don't
Great.
have anything next week because it's
Okay,
Christmas
just-
holidays. So we're taking
that
some
checks
holiday
out.
time
I
for
love
us.
that.
Yep. So we have Chatwater tonight, obviously, because you're here. Thank you. We have character development on Wednesday, Frostlands of Fen Relic on Thursday, and Saturday is our last main campaign, and we're taking a full week off, so all of us can enjoy the holiday time in our respective houses, because we're all observing quarantine, and because that's what's going on here in BC right now. And then we will be back on, I believe it's let me check my calendar here. We will be back on the 27th for a very special episode of Chatwater, which is going to be Tim's Fireside Year-End Chat, the year-end review with Tim and Yanis. Sean and I will not be here, and it will simply be those wonderful two people talking about some of the most amazing moments that we've experienced over the course of what's been streamed and maybe before, getting Tim's insight into kind of like what's going on in the campaign right now without Sean and I asking question after question and the question in the background.
It's gonna be firmly on the rails.
It will be
No, we're gonna talk about,
very underailed.
We're gonna talk about, Tim's favorite moments. We're gonna talk about when the party did things that Tim didn't expect. We're gonna talk about when you guys went down the exact path he laid out for you. There's like one occasion, that one will be very quick. But we are going to talk about, everything what it's like, Tim's process has been like, his enjoyment from it, just this crazy experience of starting to stream it and how that's changed what he's done. It's going to be a fantastic episode. I'm very, very excited.
If you have any questions for our darling DM and Yanis for that episode, please don't hesitate to let us know. Pop them up in the chat here. We'll also be asking for them over the next couple shows before the end of the week. So please, please, please send us your questions, and we'll make sure that they get sent his way. I know he's really, I'm just looking at him in the background. He's very excited for this wonderful little fireside chat. I think there will be some wonderful beverages involved, some comfy clothes, and perhaps the crackle of a beautiful fire in the background to keep you all company. It'll be great. So should we talk about the thing we're actually going to talk about today?
Yes.
Let's roll those bones.
We've
Roll those
got
bones.
25 minutes. No, I'm just joking.
No, we're gonna dish and we're gonna talk about some RPG history. So every now and again we do these episodes of Chatwater where we don't necessarily talk about the arcs of the campaign, but we talk a little bit about RPG theory. So we haven't done one in a really long time, since before we started doing the arc stuff. So it felt a right time to. We're at a nice break, so it felt time to do one again. So when I asked Sean and Yanis what they wanted to do, RPG history was a very good one. So I am titling this RPG history, the Han Dynasty to Critical Role. So we're going to span a very long time of RPG gaming.
What a title.
Yes.
Let's start with the Han Dynasty.
Okay,
That
so-
sounds sick.
Right. So we've all experienced the resurgence of games, like in role-playing games in the last little while, like D&D and Call of Cthulhu over the last 6 years or so. Thank you, Critical Role. And new games being released by other publishers like Vampire the Masquerade, but it wasn't always this way. There was really RPG gaming as we know it is very, very new. We're talking the last 45 years. Only RPG gaming has really been around in the modern RPG gaming experience that we know it now. So role-playing games begin with an earlier tradition of role-playing that later started combining rule sets of fantasy wargaming together to create the most famous RPGs that we know and love today. So to first talk about RPGs, we have to define what an RPG is. So it's a type of game in which participants assume roles of a character and start collaboratively creating stories. Characterization determines actions, and the characters either succeed or fail in their endeavors based on a preset system of rules and guidelines. So within the rules, the characters and thereby the players may act freely, and their choices then shape the direction and the outcome of the game. Their actions have consequences, and all actions influence events within the game itself. So like for every RPG game you have out there, that is a very basic definition that could fit them, regardless of what game system you're playing.
So RPGs are games where people pretend to be things,
Yes.
do stuff,
Yes.
and there's a rule set.
Yes.
Then there is a mechanics that supports the narratives.
Yes.
People who do stuffs, the
Yeah.
narrative, and there's mechanics that
support it.
facilitates it.
So RPGs
It's
that we
just
know.
two hands kissing.
Just two hands kissing.
Get
RPGs
your
that we
fucking Chatwater shirt. Get your Chatwater. Get your fucking Chatwater shirt. We won't answer your questions.
RPGs as we know them today consist of the following components. They consist of one game master, potentially, and at least one player, a randomizing agent such as dice, cards, or chit of some kind, a writing, storage, and retrieval method like pencils and paper or a tablet, or a system like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or D&D Beyond, something like that. A rule system, whether published or homebrew. This basic rule structure is agreed upon prior to playing the game, and adaptations are often made based on the game master and player interactions. There's some form of story or adventure module, whether pre-prepared or improvised. There's a gathering place of some kind, generally seated with limited physical engagement, because there are RPGs that involve a lot of physical engagement, live action RPGs or LARPs, or which have their own thing, and we'll do another RPG
We'll get
theory.
there.
We will get there because I want to fucking talk about LARP so bad. Yes.
We could talk about it, or as a stretch goal, we could just fucking do it.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that later.
Later. And then some form of cooperative social interaction. So this is like ways of collaborative. Oh God, I can't speak tonight. Collaboratively engaging in storytelling experience as a group, shared consciousness about the events and the experience world. So that's the basic definition of what RPG games are. So RPG games, as I said, come from this intersection of role-playing and wargaming that kissed and made. This works for so many things when talking about RPGs. So we'll first talk about early role-playing games, and then we'll talk about wargaming because role-playing games came first.
The Han Dynasty, the way
The Han Dynasty. So role-playing games often have some of their strongest roots in historical reenactment. So in the Han Dynasty, they often enjoy this form of interactive dinner theater where participants would be assigned roles and pretend to be individuals from an earlier dynasty. And then the entire group would participate in this group storytelling experience about an epic event from their history.
So like a murder mystery night that they do now.
Yes. And we will get to murder mystery parties and where those came from too, because those are part of role-playing history. So then we see role-playing games evolve more in 16th century Europe through commedia dell'arte. So improvisation groups who brought people together for interactive storytelling experiences based on stock stories and stock characters, but then dialogue was improvised between the audience and the performers to tell a story. So there you have people bringing people in to start playing roles. Like the audience would be given a role and that would be who they would play. That would be part of the experience. Yeah, very cool, right? So then we see earliest 20th century. So in the 1920s, there was assassin style games that were played in New York City in the 20s. And they were often played by socialites at parties. And these are the early precursors to murder mystery games. So people would have to go around the party and someone would be mafia and someone would be police and they'd have to tap someone and be like, "You're dead." And they would be like a whole secret of trying to find out who the like mafioso was. Very, very fun. And then we see
it's like Among Us in real life.
Exactly, played by socialites who likely had some or little involvement with the mob, depending on which kind of socialites they were. And then we have the mid 20th century, so 1950s and early 1960s saw a rise in historical reenactment, which spawned creative history groups. So that were often played by the reenactors, and these were often dedicated to accurately recreating medieval history with only mild fantasy elements. So that is like early role playing that gets us up into about 1960, which is where things need to start for when they start kissing. About 1960.
Now, important. I'm just curious about this. That kind of sounds like LARPy stuff. If it's historical reenactment, European stuff, like, are we imagining like 60s folks in like suits of armor and on horses and like jousting and stuff?
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So like, but it was very much the sense that there was very few fantasy elements in it. And a lot of it was very much like, we have to perfectly reenact exactly how this would be at, say, a tournament or like a battle or something like this, that they would often, like, historical reenactors would, invest so much money into actually creating suits for themselves, or some sort of like garb for themselves to bring to these things, and then they would act out like battles, like the War of 1812. There would be big battles that would be done. Early battles from World War One were very popular as well. So like some of the big ones, they would obviously do them on a much smaller scale, but things would be reenacted with as much accuracy as possible, often doing really big deep dives into like historical fiction or historical nonfiction to figure out what people were actually doing during those battles.
Cool.
Which is pretty rad.
So it's more really accurate Renfest than like LARP party.
Yeah, like too accurate of a Renfest, where people would be like, "This isn't Renfest. This is something
gatekeepy Renfest."
Gatekeepy Renfest. Yes, absolutely.
We love that. We don't, but cool.
So that's. Go ahead, Yannis.
I think it's also probably important to note that there were probably tons of RPG or role-playing style history in other parts of the world that we don't necessarily know about. I don't think I think we should probably just mention that it wasn't something that was necessarily European invented. It's a human thing to want to
storytelling
to
is
role
a human
play.
thing. Yeah. And so I think
but
that's absolutely right.
Unfortunately history is very much
whitewashed.
So that's the ones we know about.
Yes.
But I'm sure
the ones that informed D&D, which is how we got here.
But I just mean like, I think when we talk about it, we just need to mention that like it's not just European
for sure
people that did it.
For sure. I think another big thing to mention, as well as the like racial inequity of the stories of role-playing games, are also the class inequity. So a lot of these games were really only accessible by socialites or people who had a lot of money to spend time doing nothing. So if you have like time to go to parties and play these games, or time to, partake in very, elaborate historical dinner theater, or go to a show like a commedia dell'arte in the 16th century, like you have money to burn. You're not out there like trying to live your life and like work to so that you can simply put food on the table.
Don't come at Commedia dell'arte. That was the people's art. Like
I'm also curious.
Don't come at Commedia dell'arte.
I'm sure there was
yes to everything else, but no.
I'm sure there was sort of versions of it played as well by lower class.
I'm sure there was
people.
It's just not recorded.
That's just not as well recorded.
Yeah, for sure. So then we move into kind of the other side of the kissing before 1960, which is wargaming. So wargaming has a really prolific history as well. They've been around for the really long time. And the earliest wargame recorded is chess. So chess originated as a game called chaturanga, which originated in 6th century India on an Indian subcontinent, and it was a simulation of Indian warfare. So different pieces on the board were rajas, high counselors, infantry, cavalry, chariots, and war elephants. So people often actually, when they played chess, incorporated role-playing elements into the game and would tell the story of their army moving across the battlefield and how they overtook the opposing army. So they would start infusing story into something as simple as chess, which is so cool to me. I was fleshing out my notes for today's session and was like, oh, that's right. They did do that. That's so cool.
Which one was the elephant? Is it the rook? Was it the little castle? Is the castle the elephant? I feel like the castle's the elephant.
I would probably.
If you don't know it off the top, that's
I
totally
don't know
fine.
off the top, but no, I can't.
It's got to be the rook. It's got to be the rook. That's got to be the elephant, though. I mean, you think about it.
In the late 18th century, chess variants then evolved into closer interactions with modern war games. So sometime around 1780, the Master of Pages to the Duke of Brunswick in Prussia created a battle emulation game with later iterations being expanded upon in 1805 by high-ranking Prussian military officers. So Prussia is like Germany, Poland, Belgium, that kind of area up there, but like northeastern Europe was the Prussian Empire. So it was played exclusively by the military. It involved moving pieces around a gaming table using dice rolls to indicate random chance, and there was a referee. So this is the first instance that is ever recorded of having something similar to a game master oversee a game. This became part of military training and were used as both strategic battle planning and then also when there was no war happening for enjoyment, and they was thought to keep the military officials sharp and their battle tactics at the ready. So that's the big thing with war games is they originally started off as like existing strictly for military folks and the elite, who were somehow tangential to the military and most exclusively played by men. Of course, because women can't be involved in war. So then we see the movement.
Too emotional.
Women are way too emotional to be involved in war at this time of centuries, of course. So we see the movement into war games as a hobby with the creation of a publication called Little Wars, which was a children's toy soldier game created in 1913 by H.G. Wells, who was a noted pacifist.
Wait, like War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells?
Yep.
What a man about town. Let him go.
Yeah. So people would use children's toys following the rules of Little Wars to create battles from the Napoleonic era onward. And he published multiple iterations, like talking about the Napoleonic Wars. There were some other wars that he talked about. Miniatures were sold to accompany the game that you bought in extension packs, essentially. And while war games were for the military and the elite, this book made wargaming accessible for folks of all classes because it was very, very inexpensive to access and available in most bookstores, which was really, really rad. Another notable.
Do you know if this happened before or after War of the Worlds? Like, I just want to know if he went like, I'm going to write apparently groundbreaking war game.
War of the Worlds was a radio show originally, which makes me think it would have happened after.
Wait, there's no way War of the Worlds was a radio show first.
And that was published in 1898, so it was about 15 years after that he created.
Oh wow! So he like came off of that. That's so fucking cool. Oh, like everything you're saying, I'm like, this should be its own Netflix series. Like just like the two dudes in Prussia who were like, "Yo, you want to invent wargaming?"
Want to invent wargaming?
Like, yes, via letters. I love this. Like,
and then another notable publication was the board war game called Diplomacy, which was created by a man named Alan Kalhammer in 1954, which sees the first inclusion of some social interaction components and interpersonal skills as part of its gameplay. There were also later iterations of the game that excluded the war part entirely, and often talked about what the officers and the military did when they weren't in combat. So that is one of the first like military linked war games that talks about social interaction.
Diplomacy as a game is still around. I've played it, and it's a friendship destroyer. Like, if you ever thought Risk was gonna ruin your life, oh, you are not prepared for diplomacy. It is
I've never played.
hell of a game.
People don't like playing Risk with me. I get really, really competitive, and then I'll annex your countries.
Here's the thing about diplomacy, Em. There's no dice rolling. It's whoever has the most wins, and the only way you can have the most is like everyone writes down what they're going to do on their turn and submits it, and we all read it at once. So it's literally after every turn, you take like 20 minutes to go into a different room and just like talk over like brandies and cigars. And so you're like, so Em, are you going to move into like the southern tip of Greece? Yes, I will. And then you go over to Yannick, you're like, I'm not going into Greece. We'll fucking fuck Sean up. And then like, so it's like playing Werewolf where you're just lying to your friends. But like, it's so much worse.
I love like that so much. It's like Risk without all of the other.
There's no dice rolling. You just fuck people over. That's the whole game.
It's the exact opposite of its name. Yeah. There's very little
point.
That's exactly what it is. It's all diplomacy. It's all just what is that? It's just politics. It's just politics.
I love it. That's great. So
Sorry,
no, please always interject when I get on tangents like this. So then we get to the late 1960s and early 1970s, which is when we start to see the kissing of wargaming and role playing. So this is the start of inclusion of fantasy elements and the dawn of modern RPGs. And really important to note, Tolkien published The Hobbit in 1937 as a children's story, and then the main trilogy spanned 1954 to 1955. The three books were released within 2 years. So these books were key influencers to the rise of fantasy RPGs. Book sales of Lord of the Rings in the US were second only to the Bible in the like 1950s and 60s. It was the most popular.
That's a shot.
Right?
Do you know that Tolkien was like best friends with C.S. Lewis?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did know
and
that.
They used to correspond by letter through the writings of both of their series.
I love that so much.
So,
apparently, Tolkien was awful to go on walks with. Apparently, he was the worst to go on walks with because he would stop and spend 20 minutes just talking about a tree that he saw, which informs me very much of his writing style in a lot of the books like the Silmarillion and stuff like that. I don't know if anyone's read the Silmarillion, but I have. I slugged through it because I needed to read it. So wargamers began to be really inspired by Tolkien's works to start modifying their more, modern war games to include fantasy creatures, magic, and individual characters rather than just center them around armies and battlements. So in the early 1960s, we see more and more fantasy. Go ahead, Sean.
What, Sean?
So, if we're breaking it down back to chess, back in the day, you may be like, oh yeah, this pawn is representative of this person or whatever. Sure. But this is the first time where you're not just applying a narrative to a specific little person on your board. You're now applying a mechanical bonus to this hero unit.
Yes.
So whereas before it's like, oh, we have the lines of cavalry and whatnot.
Sure,
but this one cavalry unit is Aragon on a horse.
Yes.
And thus this one cavalry unit, which, is physically indistinguishable because they're all from the same wargaming set, is now we are going to homebrew rules that makes Aragon more powerful.
So that's the rise here. One of the biggest rises that we can see is the rise of the individual character. So when things start getting really micro, into on like one person, and we start seeing the very early days of PCs, player characters. So in the early 1960s, we see more and more fantasy elements be included on small scales. So there was a linguist named M.A.R. Barker, created a fantasy world known as Tecumseh. So Barker developed this setting. He was a professor at a university, and he essentially developed this fantasy world setting that he created through what he called his Thursday night groups, he would gather a bunch of his friends over together to tell stories and flesh out the world. Yeah. So
he was like a writer who was like, I'm going to let other people do the legwork of coming up with
like,
what
come
these
tell
characters
stories,
do.
come be in this world, come interact with it. Let's tell stories together so that I can flesh out this world setting, and we'll have more
Thursday night groups.
Yes, right? Like spooky, isn't it? So we'll talk more about Tecumseh and the involvement with the group TSR, the company TSR, in a moment. So in 1969, at the University of Minnesota, Dave
Nice.
Wesley, who was a noted wargamer, moderated a session for a group of player characters set in a Napoleonic-esque setting centered on the small town of Braunstein. So this small setting game that took place rather than the whole Napoleonic War in just this one little town spawned more offshoots. So more people were like, wow, this is really cool. He's, rather than setting a war game over in a total war, he's done it in this one small town with these small interactions, these individual characters. And then eventually we see the creation of the Lake Geneva Wargaming Society. So the Lake Geneva Wargaming Society was created in 1970, and they hosted one of the very first games run by Gary Gygax and Jeff Perrin. So they premiered a set of rules that they had written for a late medieval game called The Siege of Badenburg, which underwent publication under the name of Chainmail in 1971.
It's a much better name.
Right.
Yeah,
it was
good.
primarily
Well
a
done.
war game, but it also had a one-page addendum for magic and fantasy creatures. One page. And then because that magical page and that became so popular and people wanted more of it, they started publishing later editions and appendices with fantasy elements like wizards and dragons involved. So now we're starting to see this kind of
No
stuff take-
dungeons yet, but we have got the
dungeons. Got
dragons.
some dragons. So then these two games, the stuff that happened with Dave Wesley and the stuff that happened with the Lake Geneva Wargaming Society, were utilized by a guy named Dave Arneson, who was the co-developer of D&D with Larry Gygax, to focus his ideas on creating the fantasy realm of Blackmoor, which was published in 1971, and this could be conventionally recognized as the first role-playing game, which was based on his Blackmoor world. What's really cool about Blackmoor is that it contains a lot of the core elements that are now really widespread through RPG gaming, like hit points, experience points, character levels, armor class, and dungeon crawls. So now we got the dungeons in there. And it also used miniatures and terrain grids to illustrate the action. And unlike previous war games, individual player characters played one person and set their own goals, in addition to scenario goals who were set by the DM, Arneson.
So
then,
it's not.
Ahead.
So this is where it's introduced. You're all trying to get through the door,
Mhm.
and you, who's playing Naragon, not Aragon, also want to,
Rescue your brother. Yeah. or something
rescue your brother. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so Gary Gygax, who was part of the Lake Geneva Wargaming Society, who had run this game and published Chainmail, heard about this thing that Dave Arneson was doing, and they were like, we got to do something together. And they collaborated on the first edition of Dungeons and Dragons. So now we get into 1974. So this period spans 1974 to the early 80s, where we start seeing the boom of RPGs. Arneson and Gygax, first publication of D&D was available in 1974, published under Gygax's company Tactical Studies and Rules, TSR. It gained a cult following, especially in college and university settings, and spawned many other games with similar look and feel. As the company grew over the next year, they were able to acquire other settings, like M.A.R. Barker's Tecumseh setting, which they released as an expansion for the original D&D stuff. So they started acquiring all of these other like campaign settings with the popularity to release them as like other stuff as part of their universe. And they
Can I pop in with a little story here
Please.
that I have found out? I often thought it was just a fun little fable, but it is actually something that happened. Is at this time, among these gentlemen working hard to develop this new crazy thing, there was one of their wives was really concerned that their husband was just like disappearing, and they were like, oh my god, my husband is cheating on me. And so one of these days, this wife followed their husband to this one house with all these never seen it before, and saw her husband sneak down, not through the front door, and was like, what is happening here?
Oh, no.
So she counts 10 20 minutes on her little watch and busts in, and it's Gary Gygax and all his friends trying out D&D, and he'd just been sneaking off and apparently not telling his wife where he was going, and she thought she was cheating on him.
Moral of the story: tell your partner you play in D&D.
Tell your partner you're playing D&D.
Invite them with you if that's
You're just hanging out with your friends.
Playing D&D.
She's worried about you.
She's just worried about you. So so because of the popularity of like the early stuff with D&D, first edition D&D, we see also the introduction of science fiction role-playing games that also came out in 1974 with games like Metamorphosis Alpha, Traveler, and Gamma World being the three big ones. We also see the creation of superhero RPGs, which started in 1974 with games like Superhero 2024. So that's 1974.
We're coming up on that pretty quick.
I know. Might need some superheroes. We also see the creation of the first modules that are released under TSR for their first edition D&D setting, which was set in Barker's Tecumseh world and called The Empire of the Petal Throne. So it was the first, book that you played all the way through straight start to finish with a group of characters, which is really, really cool. In 1976, we also see some of the first live action role-playing groups emerge, like Dagahir, and conventions around RPGs also starting to begin, as well as the publication of Dragon Magazine in 1976, which is the big RPG original D&D magazine. Dragon Magazine, still around today. So go ahead, Sean.
Just a little tangent. I am often, I don't know, just awed by the power that magazine syndication had back in the day. And because I'm a little internet baby. I came up with the internet. I was like, magazines are cool or whatever, but whatever. But so much of these niche things throughout history has been these great minds just meeting through the questions and answer sections in these magazines.
Yeah.
And so I'm oh, the power, the history in Dragon, the first role-playing magazine.
Well, Dragon Magazine was one of the biggest sponsors of the very first Gen Con. So Gen Con being the Lake Geneva Wargaming Society convention.
Oh, it's all coming together.
But speaking of the magazine thing, Sean, did you know that George R.R. Martin started writing by writing little stories that was published in the back of a fantasy magazine?
That checks out.
He would submit. They had a section where fans could submit short stories, and that was how he got into it.
Hey, George.
I love that. What's up, George?
He doesn't write anything. He doesn't write anything fast enough to publish anymore. But
oh gosh. So from 1977 to 1979, TSR, which is Gary Gygax's company, launches AD&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which covered many of the unexplained and unanswered rules that were not present in the first system, and really dove deep into minutia that is even impressive by today's standards. So included in the AD&D books were something as the odds of finding a singing sword. There was there was the ability, how likely are you to find a singing sword, as well as, or the odds of coaxing gossip out of a tavern keeper. So these kind of things were all included in AD&D. It was clunky. There was a lot of rules, and game masters often needed to pour through books and books and books to do things.
Like a wizard.
Hell like a real wizard, yeah. So from here, the hobby started expanding into teenagers, and it started a growing national fan base across the US. So there were new publishers who started releasing things like Chaosium, who released Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest in 1980, as well as companies like Iron Crown, Enterprises, Palladium, Victory Games, and West End Games, who are still creating games today that all capitalized on the characteristics and skill systems that were introduced by D&D, the first edition of Dungeons and Dragons. So that takes us up to the 1980s. So we're getting there. We are getting there. So RPGs in the early 1980s began hitting the international market and started being translated into different languages, and different countries were seeing their own increase in the creation of RPGs.
Here's a question, just when we're talking about international. It sounds like all these companies were really based out of America. Because, translating to a different language is a whole thing. Was, as far as there any 1970s equivalent happening in England?
There was.
Or was it just not popping over there?
because of these really strong roots in traditional wargaming that really sat in Europe, the storytelling aspect didn't really come in too much until the 70s. But once
Okay.
it started kind of rolling out of the US, it began blossoming in Europe, where the wargaming side met the storytelling role-playing aspect. And so there was a huge boom of role-playing games in France. And there is still some really amazing games that are have been published out of France by French companies, as well as Germany, Spain, Sweden, of course, is part of the Scandinavian and Nordic component, the UK and Japan. A lot of really cool role-playing games coming out of Japan as well. So second edition D&D is published in 1988 and sees the incorporation of more Tolkien-esque facets and characters, and sees the first use of the term Vorpal in RPG games. So this was influenced by Lewis Carroll's poem, The Jabberwocky, as the Vorpal sword was the most powerful sword in the game. So that's the very first time that Vorpal was ever introduced. And the Vorpal sword is still around today in D&D. We also see the... Go ahead, Sean.
So I just like the one thing that I mean, I feel like I'm such a fanboy for the past,
please, that's why we're doing
but like,
this.
I don't know, just as someone who's raised with the internet, like there was a time when just fucking like everything, like you didn't know what the reference was.
Mhm.
Like if you hadn't read Alice in Wonderland, like these fucking people writing these things would just be like, I fucking love the fucking Alice in Wonderland. I love Jabberwocky. In the sequel, that one little weird poem where she goes in the backwards room and picks up the book and is like, this is the page I flipped to, and then you just put it in a thing.
Yeah.
One of the fucking Warhammer 40K, like the grimdark setting, one of the original like Inquisitors, who's like the big guy, was just called Sherlock Obi-Wan, and like that's just what people would do. They're like, I
love
fucking
that.
love this. I want to
Love
play
this.
as Sherlock Holmes / Obi-Wan
Obi-Wan
Kenobi. Fuck subtlety. Who's gonna call me out? It's just for me and my friends. And then they just do it. And like I love like the what, and then the weird part is they were so successful at it that now we're not even calling it out for plagiarism. It's just part of history. We're like, yeah, the Vorpal sword, it cuts things heads off. That's what it does. That's not
A
lazy.
Snicker snack.
That's wonderful.
That's what it does.
Yeah. And like,
an example of that that's not role play related. We're just talking about how like the influence that magazines had. Like Richard Branson, he made all of his money because he grew up in a small town in England, and you couldn't buy records where they didn't have access to records. So when he graduated high school, he moved to London, and he started a magazine about music. And in the back, you could order by mail records, and he would go buy them and then mail them to you. And it did so well. And he was like, oh, this is awesome. Like people are buying all these records through my magazine. He called the magazine Virgin Magazine because at the time he was a virgin and he thought it was funny. And then he's like, oh, well, these records are doing really well. I should start signing my own bands because now I have a distribution model. So I should start signing my own bands, and then I can sell my bands stacked in along all these other bands that I'm selling.
That's so smart.
And so one of the first bands he discovered was the Rolling Stones. And then it just like, it went, sky's the limit from there. But it's also that the power of like the magazine, like it was your only connection to the outside world. So like nowadays you can get any information about anything. But back then, if you held the power of knowledge for people, especially people who didn't have access to it from somewhere else.
Gatekeeping knowledge, yeah.
Yeah, you could had incredible amounts of power.
and,
So cool. So
like
cool.
literally fucking sages, man. Like, because how would you even know that magazine exists except you talk to the right person who knew the thing, whose like cousin had a subscription and you heard about it. Like the power of having a friend who worked at a record store who like knew the person who knew everything. Like, dude, we all have it now, and that's awesome. But oh my god, like yeah, what's your taste in music now? Who gives a shit? We all have Spotify, we all have Apple Music. Like music is good, and we all know that. Like, and we can find whatever we want, easy peasy. But like, be like, yeah, I know shit that isn't even played in the radio in this country because I know a dude who spent a summer in fucking Dublin, and they got some wild shit going on over there.
You know the story of Sugar Man, right? The
Yeah.
musical artist, right? Where his record was brought over to South Africa and then was copied and by other people and then distributed in South Africa. And he was like an unknown artist in North America. I grew up listening to his music. Like it was like my mom's favorite or my parents' favorite musicians was like Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, and Sugar Man. That was like the three we listened to every single day. And it wasn't until the documentary came out that I was like, oh, you guys don't know about this music? Like how do you bring it? Like, how do you bring it up? Like, it's just like, it was
especially
like
when you
parents...
expect people like know it, when you expect that it's common knowledge.
It's up there with all the other famous singers. The like when the world was a big place, like things moved.
Globalization, and it shrinks everything down.
Yeah, and that's like what you were talking about, like it not popping up in Europe, because like the idea was conceived and rippled out, but the ripples were so small by the time they got like all the way out to Europe that they didn't have access to that like little brainwave that was had by a group of people.
Well, of course, and this is also like this is also influenced too by the fact that like, you know, when the 60s and 70s are coming around, we're still influenced by all the like actual wars that are going on in the world, right? So the UK has some stances on things, the US has some stances on things, the other like military powers have stances on things. So there was this sense of like entrenchment, sorry for the pun, about like about the things that you did in your country, the way that you exist. So when something that's like, oh, that's just what Americans do, right? Like that's that very much that culture of like, we don't do that here. And like the traditionalism around wargaming was very much a like, this is the proper way to do things. This is the proper way to play games, was wargaming. And then when role playing got involved in it, and they saw like a lot of companies saw the success of it, that's when it started being disseminated. Money.
Oh, those Americans, they want to war game with elves and dragons. What a bunch of
even
idiots.
though Tolkien was British. So we see the introduction.
Yeah. But that was a fantasy book. You don't play a book.
You don't smush them together.
You have a narrative.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
And that's it. It's a narrative.
Nobody kissing.
And you read it. You don't interact with it. There's no kissing. You look at it. You look at it from afar. And it
you read the book,
Darcy.
And then you go play some war games, but no kissing.
You don't kiss. You have mechanics and you have narratives, and they chastely stare at each other from across the room. And that
I'm in the middle.
I'm in the
very
middle.
Austin-esque. They kiss me, but they do not kiss each other.
No. Little kisses for me, but not each other.
Okay, we're moving on.
I love this character. This guy is going to be a staple of chatWater.
What a delight.
The anti-kissing.
The anti-kisser. There's no
the
kissing.
hand blocker.
Let's go live to Reginald and Reginald's hot take.
Reginald Kissblocker. That's his
I
name.
personally didn't care for the last episode of Blackwater. I thought that, they should have just spoken to the mummy and accepted the information and then gone about, and then the players should have stopped playing the game and,
when playing
themselves as people.
The mandolin is a peasant's instrument. If it had been a violin, they could have kept it, but a mandolin...
I would have preferred a harpsichord, honestly.
Rule players would have brought home a theremin. I don't know what any of you are talking about. Okay, so
theremin. Reginaldson plays the theremin.
Absolutely,
the
he does.
gentleman's instrument.
Yes.
Wait, the traditionalist Reginald is ride or die for the theremin.
Absolutely.
M's not allowed to play Reginald anymore.
Okay, moving forward.
Don't gatekeep Reginald from M. She's allowed to play with
she
it.
Made him play the theremin. She made him play the theremin.
No, it's Reginald's wife, Matilda, who's into the weird occultist shit. So we see the introduction of companies.
I don't invite my wife to the events.
Women
She's
don't
not
play
allowed
war
in the
games.
gentleman's room where we do the war gaming. She's into this.
It's not a true chatWater.
Last time she came into the war game room, she asked if that little box was a dragon. Preposterous.
It's clearly Napoleon's right-hand man, Jacques.
Okay, so we're still in the 1980s. We see the introduction of
We have
companies.
so far to go.
Not actually.
I'm
we've got
surprised
10
we have.
minutes
I'm
left.
surprised we didn't move backwards after that.
We're doing great. We're doing
We're
really
gonna
good.
go back to the 1960s.
We see the introduction of companies publishing more basic non-themed RPG systems like
Heresy.
Chaosium's basic role-playing game in 1981, followed by GURPS, which is the generic universal role-playing system by Steve Jackson Games in 1986. Games like Champions in 1981 introduced more balance between PCs and regarding their statistics that allowed players to have more customization, because previously all stats were rolled. They were randomized and rolled.
Hell yeah.
So Champions created the system where they were allowed to roll for customization around characteristics, skills, and advantages, as well as and if you had rolled higher in something, you had advantage in it. Rolled lower stats, you had disadvantage in it. This continued to develop with some games leading into more stats-based and more skills-based, that some were more role-playing heavy, like Vampire the Masquerade in 1991, and spawning titles under their World of Darkness series. Fun fact, Onyx Path is one of the big creators who now oversees Vampire the Masquerade, as well as Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, and a bunch of other ones that follow the same World of Darkness series. Okay, so we can't talk about the 1980s without talking about the Satanic Panic and the
We're here. Yeah.
bothered about Dungeons and Dragons. BADD, bothered about Dungeons and Dragons. There is a content warning on this segment around suicide and mental health difficulties. So if you need to go take care of yourself or stop listening at any point, please do so. I'll also give a wave like this when it's done. So if that's something that's a big trigger for you, you can jump back in when I wave again. So in the mid to late 1980s, we see a huge uproar around Dungeons and Dragons. This has roots in the disappearance of 16-year-old American boy named James Egbert III, who disappeared from Michigan State University in 1976. Police trail ran cold. He was missing for about 4 or 5 days. A private investigator was hired by the family and determined that, with very little knowledge of what D&D actually was and never having known a lot, his parents didn't know a lot about his life. He was a bit of a child prodigy. He was at university at the age of 16. That D&D was what caused his disappearance. Egbert actually suffered from what was likely strong episodes of paranoia and dissociation, which will likely be diagnosed today probably on like big psychotic breaks and stuff like that, and had self-isolated in the utility tunnels underneath the university. He died by suicide in 1980, and the media was quick to jump on this fact that D&D was to blame for his suicide death. This was further fueled by the death by suicide of a man named Lee Pulling, as his mother, Patricia Pulling, believed that her son's suicide was caused by playing D&D as well. She attempted to sue the high school that her son attended, claiming that the curse put on her son's character by the principal, who was the DM, was real. She also sued TSR. Both cases were dismissed by the courts. They didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. But like, what a...
Yeah.
Fucking cool principal, like fucking taking time out of the day to play with the kids.
Also,
and
kids
then,
who
like,
likely had a lot going on and were struggling.
Yeah. And with a mom who just accused somebody of laying a literal fucking curse on it.
Yeah. She then went on to create a book, a group, like a parents advisory group called Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons, playing on the MAD, like MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. She created Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons, BADD, in 1983, which claimed that D&D, I'm reading verbatim, D&D was a fantasy role-playing game which promotes demonology, witchcraft, voodoo, murder, blasphemy, suicide, assassination, insanity, sexual perversion, homosexuality, prostitution, satanic rituals, gambling, barbarism, cannibalism, sadism, holy desecration, demon summoning, necromantics, divination, impure thoughts, and other teachings that are specifically targeted at children.
I would say like 60% of that is true, though. Like...
She then began a very intensive like smear campaign, essentially across conservative and Christian outlets, whoever would have her, which reached its peak when in an episode where she appeared on 60 Minutes, with Gary Gygax in 1985. So there was two, they were sitting across a room having a debate from each other,
I
apparently.
want to find this.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
right? I haven't been able
It's
to
out
find
there.
it, but it might be out there. Many organizations then took up the cause to investigate whether D&D had actual any sort of links to mental health difficulties, notably the American Association of Suicidology, which I am actually proudly a member of, the U.S. Center for Disease Control, as well as Welfare Canada, and
Type.
found, you guessed it, that there is no causal link between D&D and suicide.
Get fucked, Patricia.
There was even a satirical movie made about this called Mazes and Monsters, which poked fun at the hysteria.
Tom Hanks, right?
With starred Tom Hanks, sent in 1982. However, the release of this movie actually did the opposite of what it was intended to do. It backfired, and a lot of people took it as a serious portrayal of how dangerous D&D is.
If you ever wondered what Tom Hanks looks like when he does bad acting, what's it called? Mazes and Monsters?
Mazes and Monsters.
It's unspeakably poor acting from Tom Hanks. You're like, oh, he wasn't always brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah. I love seeing people who are like greats and excellent doers of what they do at a time when they fucking
weren't great at it. Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. It's so inspiring to see Tom Hanks just not carry the film. It's wild.
So in 1990, the American Association of Suicidology released a scathing report against BAD called the Pulling Report, and said that the moral panic Pulling and her associates were claiming was actually causing more harm than D&D has ever done, and showed evidence in their research that D&D gamers actually have lower rates of suicide in comparison to non-gamers. They also cited an increase in social connection and feelings of worth and value while playing. Something really cool that did happen from this was that researchers, mostly psychology researchers, as well as sociologists and anthropologists, started to look into D&D and RPG gaming and its impact on the psychological experience. So there are professors and people out there who actually research gaming and how it influences people, and that has also spawned lots of research into video gaming, and that has spawned research into the cognitive effects of video gaming. There's a really amazing researcher at Simon Fraser University, where I did my undergrad, named Mark Blair, who determined cognitive peaks for people based on StarCraft. So he used information pulled from StarCraft to figure out when people's cognitive peak is. Spoiler alert, it's 24. So if you're over 24, you're on the down. Sorry.
That checks out.
I mean,
right?
it's very individual.
Sure. Bothered about Dungeons and Dragons, ceased to exist after Pulling's death in 1977. The damage done, however, by Pulling and BADD at this point had already been done. Her research is often cited by many public organizations, even to this day, like libraries and prisons and schools, as reasons to keep D&D out of those
fucking
places.
Hays Code, motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So I'm going to wait
that's a
because
different thing,
folks can come back in now. I will not be talking about that trigger warning content stuff anymore. After the controversy of the late 1980s, or in a lot of the early controversy of the 1980s, TSR, which is Gary Gygax's organization, removed the term devils and demons to try and placate these organizations.
Is that where we get fiends from?
Yes, that is where we see one of the
Tight.
first iterations of fiends. They also replaced them with terms called the Bazatu and the Tanari, even though that devils and demons were often still commonly used in a lot of home gaming and stuff like that. But these terms were reintroduced in 1988, notably a year after Pulling's death, and also with the publication of A Guide to Hell in 1999, and the reintroduction of the Blood War as the eternal war between the devils and of the hells and the demons of the abyss as being central to this component. So I don't know whether that's
metal lives on.
It's a bit metal, right? So now we're at the mid to late 90s. We actually start seeing a decline in popularity of RPG gaming. So with the advances in home computing, tabletop and RPG games declined a lot, especially with releases like the Elder Scrolls from Bethesda in 1994. So what Bethesda sought to do with the Elder Scrolls was take a paper game that existed completely analog and create a computer version of it that could be played by one player without the social context of it. Now, there's still the role-playing aspects. So there are we can talk about ERPGs, electronic RPGs, over which spawns MMORPGs and all those kind of other stuff. Another time that is another subsect of RPG gaming. But that's where these kind of really started taking popularity as well. Games like Magic the Gathering was created in 1993 by Wizards of the Coast, which immediately soared to popularity and began to outshadow D&D sales and previous RPGs that had come before it. So articles were starting to appear in Dragon Magazine forecasting the end of role-playing. So people were starting to talk about how stuff was so on the decline that it was never going to come back to like the beautiful heyday of the like late 70s, especially with stuff after the moral panic around D&D. So TSR tried to publish more and more and more stuff, but suffered. They essentially not necessarily went bankrupt, but the stuff they were producing wasn't selling. So they just kept overproducing, and they just couldn't keep up with things. In 1997, TSR was purchased by Wizards of the Coast, who kind of took them under their branch. And in 1998, Wizards was purchased by Hasbro, who still currently owns them for approximately $325 million in 1998.
It's a good investment.
A very good investment.
Are we still on second edition at this point?
We're on third edition and 3.5 around this point.
When did that? So that was like mid 90s, 3.5.
That was
drop?
mid 90s was 3.5. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
or actually, sorry. Yeah, mid 90s was 3.5.
Okay.
So
Nice.
something cool that arose out of this era, though, despite the fact that there was this decline in popularity in RPG gaming, was the more theoretical and scientific side of RPG games, which had spawned out of this moral panic and people like bigger associations being like, we got to look more at RPG gaming. There's something here, but it's obviously not bad. So the publications on articles on RPG theory became quite popular through the emergence of the Scandinavian RPG scene. There was also the first conferences on RPG theory, like the science behind gaming began in Scandinavia, and they still continue today. Much of the focus on the development of LRPGs, live action role-playing games, as well as Nordic LARP, which is different. Like LARP as a concept is different from an LRPG. And we'll get
I
there.
can't wait for this episode.
We'll
That's
get
going to
there.
be so juicy.
It's delightful. We'll get there. So that's when, and this is like the late 90s is when this Nordic LARP explosion began as well. And it was really getting its time to shine. So now we move into the 2000s. We see a slow, continual kind of pace for RPGs. And then we get 2009 when Pathfinder was released. So Pathfinder was intended for backwards compatibility with D&D 3.5. So it was originally a game created by a different thing that you could be like, yeah, D&D 3.5 is great. And you've also got these other rules that can kind of work with it, or you can create your own system around it. A lot more customization. There's a lot more minutia in it, capturing a lot of the like different skills that you can do with Pathfinder there. It then became the top selling RPG from 2011 to 2013. It was the top selling RPG game in the world. Wizards released 4th edition in 2008, which was deemed very lackluster by critical comparison to Pathfinder. I know, I'm just going by what the literature
No,
says.
look, I lived it. I was there. I remember.
I know. I was thinking about this too as I was putting my notes together. So I run summer camps for kids. Amongst the myriad of other things I do in the before COVID said no summer camping. And in 2009, it was one of my first years of running a senior camp. So I ran like camps for like older teens, like we're talking like 13 to 17 was the age range. One of my, the captain leaders that I worked with was super into Pathfinder. So our theme, and he was like, oh, well, why don't we make this be the theme of our camp? We had like, we called it Castles and Kingdoms. And one of our like final like camp-wide events was a LARP fight. Like we made boffer swords and shields and like boffer arrows, and there was like spells and magic, and it was very fun. So like that kind of stuff. So Pathfinder spurned a lot of stuff, and it would kind of overshadowed Wizards of the Coast and their D&D stuff at the time. So Wizards backpedaled. They promised the next edition that they would release would be focused more on user feedback and actually feel more playable and try and capture some of the magic of some of the previous editions that they had. And then things changed when 5th edition was released in 2014. This was a highly acclaimed release and with an overwhelmingly positive critical review. Wizards of the Coast was back, D&D was back, and it overtook Pathfinder sales by a long shot and saw a new resurgence in its popularity as the world's favorite RPG game. And then we hit 2015, which Critical Role comes on the scene. And I can't talk about the history of role-playing games without talking about Critical Role, not just because I love Critical Role, but because it has fundamentally changed role-playing gaming history. So they came on the scene in March of 2015, and they almost, at that time, single-handedly drove the renaissance of D&D because they brought it to new audiences all around the world. And that wave that we're riding is kind of brings us to now, 2020. So there are hundreds of D&D live play shows across Twitch and YouTube, and there's hundreds of other podcasts as well, and there's media about the game everywhere. It spawned like subgroups, and there's like so much D&D content out there. And the renaissance of it has to do with Critical Role. Because what they've done is they've made, while yes, they are professional voice actors and performers, they've also made the game feel accessible to everybody. They're a group of friends who played this home game that started in a living room that turned into magic, which is very evident in the very first episode you see them together. Because yeah, the sound and the video quality is bad, but the magic that is captured at that table is palpable and has only carried on. I even think through I've watched all of Critical Role. I'm like 4 episodes behind right now, and I'm like doing my best to catch up. But like, it is magic that is shared now with hundreds of thousands of people across the world.
Millions of people.
Millions, right? And they've made it more mainstream and more accessible for other people to play as well. And so that's where we are today. We're still riding that wonderful D&D renaissance of the late 2010s.
I mean, that's how I found D&D was I stumbled upon Critical Role before I even knew what Twitch was. I found Critical Role on YouTube, and then they were like, oh, we're also on Twitch. And so I, went over and started watching them. And I had like you say, it made it accessible. I had no idea what D&D was. It was a long time after watching that I started to actually learn anything about the game.
Yeah.
Because the game wasn't super important.
No. And that's what they did. They brought narrative focused collaborative storytelling back to the forefront of gaming, which makes it more accessible. Because when I think something that has always been gate-kept is one of the gatekeeping things about a lot of role-playing gaming systems, especially more modern role-playing gaming systems that we see today, are the stats, the rolling, the math, the building, some that kind of those subsects of like, oh, your character has to do this and they have to have these abilities and they have to have these scores, when you can actually just put all that aside for a little bit and just have some people telling a story. Maybe they roll dice every once in a while when things get a bit more mechanical. But I think that that's one of the reasons why D&D is now so popular, is because games like Critical Role have showed us that it can be more. It can be more than just numbers on a page. It is a beautiful storytelling medium, and it is a what's the word? It's a currency that we can share between each other to build very, very strong social bonds through the collaborative love of each other and storytelling at the same time. And then, we roll some dice sometimes and do some math.
I mean, I will say, having played Pathfinder 4E and 5E, 5E by design, its mechanics are that, because like Pathfinder and 4E was all about +2, +2, +2, +2, +2. It was so much math to be like,
stats.
oh, he's prone, that's +2. This guy's here, that's +2. I've got this axe, that's +2. It was all just math.
Mm-hmm.
And what 5E did, advantage. You've got a dice. Now you roll 2. And that's just, and you either have advantage or you don't. And if you're an elf, sometimes you get triple advantage, but that's a very special thing. You have to get a feat for it. Like, just taking getting rid of the math, and it's like these math rocks. Everyone likes the math rocks. We all played Monopoly. You get 2. And I love 5th edition for a lot of things, but just the mechanic of advantage makes it so much more accessible than these previous wonderful versions.
Yes.
That offer their own things. But I'll take advantage over the +2s any day.
Yeah. So that's the history of RPG games.
Thank you very much.
It's an abridged. It's an abridged history. Of
No,
course, but-
no, we covered everything
Great.
there was to cover.
Perfect.
No, it's wild. I mean, it's pretty crazy that how it all ended up and how it's. Yeah, I mean, you definitely see it in everything now.
Mm-hmm.
Even with like the Disney movie Onward that came out, which is
Onward was such a treat. I cried through a lot.
Heavily inspired by D&D. Yeah, it's fantastic to see it do so well, and hopefully it continues to do well.
I mean, coming out next year, I believe we have 2 different animated shows: the Critical Role on Amazon,
yes,
and the Adventure Zone on I think Peacock,
which is NBC's.
But like, we're having 2 D&D shows
that spawned from like this
of
like...
the rent. We haven't had a D&D show since the OG D&D show, like back in the 80s.
Yes,
where they're like level 1 characters fighting Tiamat. Like,
well, and even like something as like, you know, coming out a couple years ago, like the inclusion of D&D in a show like Stranger Things, like, you know, stuff like that also kind of fuels renaissance of like this cult you know, game being brought back up. What, Sean?
Well, what's so cool about that scene, particularly from Stranger Things, is Stranger Things is such a callback to 1980s films, specifically E.T. And E.T. was like a thing that introduced a whole generation of kids into D&D, because they're like, what's Elliot's older brother playing?
Yes.
Like, what is going on in that scene?
Yes.
What isn't Elliot being invited to? D&D, baby! So like, fucking Stranger Things harkening back to the OG like golden age of D&D and helping itself launch the new fucking renaissance of D&D. Time's a flat circle. Fuck! Like,
and it's
I'm
like
gonna get a subscription to Dragon Magazine. Let's go.
and I mean, like, I think I know for myself, like Adam in our stream, like he was the one who introduced me to D&D. Like, well, not really. Like, I mean, my dad used to play a lot. Shout out to my dad. My dad played
Shout out to Grim Caban.
Grim Caban is not my dad.
No, but it's just, no, wait, that's the fuck.
No,
Whoops.
no, Stickman is my dad. Sup, Dad?
Oh, excuse me.
So I know my dad played a lot when he was in high school with his friends, and like, you know, showed me a little bit when I was younger, but like, you know, I started playing, you know, Adam Lucas was getting a group together and he's like, hey, do you and Tim want to play? And we were like, that sounds great. I'm not doing anything else. I just got turned down for a bunch of stuff and I'm kind of sad. So yeah, I need something else to do in my life.
Perfect time for D&D.
It was a perfect time for D&D.
Sad feelings and free time.
Big sad feelings and a lot of free time. So I started playing D&D and then was like, holy fuck, where has this been all of my life? And now I don't foresee a future where I'm ever not playing this wonderful game, like in some shape or form. I think it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I'm very happy that it's getting its day in the sun. Another one, at least.
I'm a big fan.
I'm a big fan.
You
know who's not a big fan though? Reginald Kissblocker. He's not a fan of.
No. What's his last name? What did we decide?
Kissblocker.
Kissblocker. Yes, Reginald Kissblocker.
Yes. So I guess that's the end of the episode. A bit longer one today because we ambled on a lot about a lot.
I mean, if you're just here for the history, I'm sure the YouTube video will be much shorter. But like, boy, did we dig into some stuff before that. So because I love that we have the 2 different types of videos. It's like, do you just want like the actual like down to business video? Yeah, we got that. Do you want to see us just shoot the shit about the last episode? That's its own thing over here.
And do you want to hear us talk about a whole bunch of other cool things that not a lot of people talk about RPG games? Well, we've got those ones too. So that's a surprise and a delight. So yeah. So
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for joining us.
Join us on Wednesday night for character development with our lovely ladies, and then join us on
Thursday.
Thursday for
Frost Wednesday.
Sean.
Join us Wednesday, where we answer questions. Well, not me, because I don't answer
the
questions.
Only
But
time.
that's the only time we answer questions is Wednesday. If you got questions, come Wednesday. Don't bring them today.
The sweet
Don't bring them
three
Thursday.
of Blackwater.
Actually, a fun thing that we started doing is like when we're just riffing at the start of Saturdays and we're talking about our favorite
Yeah.
sharks and like our least favorite types of mud. We've started getting in the chat. So sometimes briefly on Saturdays we'll answer questions in the chat.
Yes.
You know,
and some
as
of
we're
us
warming
may
up.
also be around at break too. We're going to try and be in the chat a bit more and hang out with the lovely Gravelverse. So please come hang out with us right at the start of stream. We're usually around for about 5-10 minutes before we start playing. And come hang out with us on Wednesday and Thursday too, because it's going to be
And
fun.
Saturday.
And Saturday, of course.
Saturday will be our last stream before our week off.
Mhm.
And if you know Tim and you know his lich love of cliffhangers, I'm sure he's got a very good one.
I was going to say
just
it's going to
waiting
have
in
to
the
be a
wings.
really good one because it's going to have to fuel him for like a week and a half before we play again. And then
I don't know if the audience knows this, but our nickname for Tim is the Cliff Lich.
Yes.
Because he gives such good cliffhangers. I don't know if that's ever been like said
I
out
think it's
loud
been-
or that was
I
just
think
an
it's
us
been.
thing.
I think we've said it, but not given an explanation.
Yes.
That
because
is
he
like his
derives his
official
power.
title
Yes.
from the
That is,
cliffhanger.
that is, he doesn't eat or drink.
No, I can
just
attest to this.
cliffhangers are the only thing that sustain him.
Doesn't sleep either. He just thinks of cliffhangers all night long. That's all he does.
This is him petting Rogue, thinking of cliffhangers.
Yes. As he snickers in the background. He's playing video games while we're filming.
Good man.
Good man.
What's he playing? What's Tim playing?
Tim's playing the Outer Worlds right now. He's watching
Ooh,
the stream.
Tim,
and
how do you
playing the
like
Outer
it?
Worlds. Tim, do you
Shout.
like it? One of these.
No, I
Nice.
want to hear you, Tim. Shout it. Do you like Outer Worlds?
It's really good.
Really
Yeah!
good. It's a real commentary on capitalism, and I love that.
That was really unpleasant, but I'm glad he got a part of that.
We will see you folks on Wednesday. Have a great night.
Love y'all.
Oh, yeah. Bye.